Yeah. Washington's famous Atlanta Compromise speech kind of seemed to accept segregation in exchange for economic opportunities for Black people.
And Du Bois just couldn't accept that and stepped backwards.
Totally rejected that idea. Du Bois believed that Black Americans deserved full citizenship, equal rights, not just a chance to work their way up within a segregated system.
Welcome to Witter. Who Has Time to Read? The podcast that brings deep dives for busy minds. Listen to AI hosts Jane and Dane and get ready to unpack the world's most captivating books in just a fraction of the time. Whether commuting, working out, or just squeezing in a quick break, we deliver key insights, thought-provoking themes, and takeaways you can carry into your day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Plus, use our links in the description to purchase this book. Your support helps us bring more engaging book discussions to you. Listen and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Who has time to read? You do, with Witter.
Welcome back to Witter, your one-stop shop for those deep dives. For busy minds, you know when you're like really craving a good book summary, but that tree pile is just out of control.
Totally. We're like your shortcut to being in the know. And for Black History Month, we're doing this special series, highlighting Black voices.
Exactly. So this time, we are going on a journey through a book that's over a century old, but still feels so relevant. The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois.
Yeah, a real classic. One of those foundational texts of African-American literature and thought. Even reading it now, it's like you can feel how Du Bois' ideas reverberated through the civil rights movement and still shape these discussions about race and equality today.
Okay, so before we dive into all that, can we just talk about Du Bois, the man, for a sec? He wasn't just some writer, in an ivory tower.
No, not at all. W.B. Du Bois was, this powerhouse sociologist, historian, Pan-Africanist, civil rights activist. This guy did it all.
It's amazing, right? He was going up against the major thinkers of his time, challenging them.
Yeah.
Especially someone like Booker T. Washington.
That's totally fearless. Du Bois, he believed in full civil rights and higher education for Black people. That was a huge contrast to Washington's approach, of accommodation and gradual progress. He even came up with this idea, the talented 10th. Basically, this group of highly educated Black individuals who he thought could lead the way towards social change.
Talented 10th. That's pretty interesting. On the one hand, it makes you think about elitism, but then again, you can see how back then, in that context, he felt like intellectual leadership was essential.
For sure. And to really get where this boldness came from, we have to go back to a pivotal moment from his childhood. Du Bois grew up relatively privileged in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. But even there, he had this early encounter with racism that really shaped him.
He talks about it in the book, right? Something about visiting cards.
Yes, he describes it so vividly.
Yeah.
So he's this young boy, right, exchanging visiting cards with his classmates, which was a normal thing back then.
Right.
But this one girl refuses to take his card.
Oh, wow. I can't even imagine at that age having your innocence just shattered by something so blatant, just rejected because of your race.
Yeah, it was this harsh reality check. And that incident became this metaphor for him, a veil that separates Black and white Americans, preventing real connection and understanding.
This veil, it's not like a literal thing. It's more like the lens that Black people are forced to see the world through and themselves, always aware of how they're being perceived by white society.
Exactly. And that leads to what Du Bois calls double consciousness, this feeling of two-ness that a lot of Black Americans experience. It's the sense of always looking at yourself through the eyes of others, measuring yourself against a world that doesn't always see you for who you are.
Yeah, he has that really powerful quote about it. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body.
It's it still resonates today, doesn't it? That internal conflict, trying to reconcile your identity in a society that doesn't fully embrace it.
Totally. It makes you think about how we all navigate different parts of ourselves, trying to figure out where we fit in. But for Black Americans, like Du Bois is saying, that two-ness is amplified because of that constant awareness of how race shapes people's perceptions. There's a lot to think about, for sure. And it makes me wonder, how did this double consciousness, this awareness of being seen, through a prejudiced lens? How did that shape his activism, his ideas for social change?
It was at the core of everything for him. He truly believed that education was the key to lifting up Black communities. But for him, it went beyond just, basic literacy. He saw education as this tool for developing critical thinking, dismantling systems of oppression.
It's not just learning a trade, but empowering people to actually challenge the way things are.
Exactly. He wanted to foster a generation of leaders, thinkers, artists. And, this is where his disagreement with Booker T. Washington really comes into focus.
Right, because Washington was more focused on vocational training, economic progress.
Yeah.
As the path to equality.
Yeah. Washington's famous Atlanta Compromise speech kind of seemed to accept segregation in exchange for economic opportunities for Black people.
And Du Bois just couldn't accept that and stepped backwards.
Totally rejected that idea. Du Bois believed that Black Americans deserved full citizenship, equal rights, not just a chance to work their way up. Within a segregated system, he argued that real freedom required both economic and social equality.
So there was a real clash of philosophies there. Washington urging a more gradual approach, and Du Bois pushing for immediate, radical change.
Yeah, you could say that. And the souls of Black folk, it isn't just theory, it's this deeply personal and evocative journey through the South.
That's right. He takes us on this trip through the Black Belt, that region with a high concentration of Black residents. What really struck you about his observations from his travels?
What really resonated with me was his honest portrayal of the economic hardships Black people faced after the Civil War. He describes in detail the system of sharecropping, where Black farmers worked on land owned by white people and paid rent with a share of their crops.
Didn't that often trap Black farmers in a cycle of debt?
It absolutely did. He breaks it down how the crop lien system, high rent, and these fluctuating cotton prices just created this crushing burden for Black farmers, basically replacing the chains of slavery with economic ones.
It's like a sobering reminder that emancipation didn't mean instant freedom and equality.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't stop there. He also talks about this horrific system of convict leasing.
Convict leasing. What was that?
Basically, it was this brutal system where Black men were often arrested for minor offenses, sometimes even made-up charges, and then leased out to working mimes on plantations, often in just awful conditions.
So even though slavery was abolished, Black people were still being forced into labor.
Yeah. And Du Bois exposes how this exploitation was often ignored or even justified by white society. These systems were designed to maintain white supremacy, control over Black labor.
It makes you think about how these patterns of systemic racism, these deep-rooted systems of oppression still affect us today. Like mass incarceration seems like a modern-day echo of these historical injustices.
You're making a really important connection there. Du Bois forces us to confront this uncomfortable truth that racial injustice isn't just about individual prejudice. It's built into the very fabric of our society, past and present.
It's pretty disheartening, to say the least. But amidst all this hardship, did Du Bois see any signs of hope, resilience in the Black Belt?
Oh, absolutely. He was incredibly moved by this strength and determination of Black people. He talks about their close-knit families, their vibrant religious communities, their enduring faith in a better future.
Finding beauty and meaning, even in the face of such adversity. That's powerful.
Yeah, he saw this resilience as a testament to the indomitable spirit of Black people. And he believed that education, in its broadest sense, was the key to unlocking their full potential, creating lasting change.
This brings us back to his idea of the tail and tenth.
Yeah.
He wasn't just talking about academic achievement, was he?
No, not at all. He envisioned these individuals who were not only smart, but also morally grounded, creatively inspired, and deeply committed to social justice. Leaders who could uplift their communities and challenge the way things are.
So for Du Bois, progress wasn't just about economic advancement. It was about cultivating the whole person, their intellect, their creativity, their spirit.
Exactly. He believed that true progress required this holistic approach, nurturing both the mind and the soul.
And this leads us to another important part of the book, his discussion of the sorrow songs. What stood out to you about Du Bois' take on
spirituals? It's interesting how he saw these songs, born from such hardship and oppression, as something more than just music, right? He really understood their depth, their complexity. I mean, for Du Bois, spirituals were this testament to the resilience, the faith, and the creativity of Black people in America. He even called them the most beautiful expression of human experience born this side of the seas.
Wow, yeah. And through these songs, he felt like you could really understand the Black experience in all its complexity. Like they offer this window into the soul of a people.
Exactly. They were a powerful way to tell stories, a way to keep history alive, express emotions, and build community. And in a way, they were also a form of resistance.
Because they allowed Black people to share their experiences, their perspectives in a society that often tried to silence them.
Exactly. It's fascinating how Du Bois, writing over a century ago, seemed to predict a lot of the challenges we still face when it comes to race in America.
Like he was writing with an eye towards the future.
Right? Well, he understood that. The fight for equality wouldn't end with the abolition of slavery or even civil rights legislation. He knew that. Achieving real equality would require a much deeper societal change.
He saw that dismantling systemic racism would be a long and difficult journey.
Yeah. And in the introduction to The Souls of Black Folk, the scholar Jonathan Scott Holloway, he connects Du Bois' ideas to our world today.
So how does Holloway see Du Bois' work informing our understanding of today's racial landscape?
Well, Holloway argues that even though we talk about living in a post-racial society, the reality is that race still has a huge impact on opportunities, experiences, and perceptions in America.
So this idea that we've moved beyond race as this defining factor in American life just isn't true.
He completely challenges that. Holloway points to things like mass incarceration, voter suppression, police brutality. It's clear proof that racial inequality is still here, often in more subtle and insidious ways.
He's basically drawing a direct line from the injustices Du Bois was fighting against to the problems we still face.
Exactly, and he argues that. Du Bois' work helps us understand how policies that seem race-neutral can actually have a disproportionate impact on Black communities.
Like those stop and frisk policies they used in New York City.
Right, those policies, even though they were presented as a way to reduce crime, they ended up disproportionately targeting Black and Latino men, even when they weren't suspected of anything.
A clear example of how systemic bias can work within institutions that are supposed to be fair and impartial.
Exactly. And Holloway points out similar patterns in things like education and employment, where policies that seem neutral can actually keep inequality going.
It's a good reminder that we need to be critical thinkers, to question assumptions, and really examine how power dynamics work in all parts of our society.
Well, that's what Du Bois encourages us to do, to look beyond the surface and really wrestle with the deeper systemic roots of racial injustice.
So as we now wrap up this Black History Month deep dive into the souls of Black folk, what's the lasting impact you hope this book has on our listeners?
I hope it inspires them to keep learning, to engage with more Black voices, and to think about how Du Bois's insights can inform their own actions and perspectives.
He pushes us to think critically, to challenge injustice, and to really work towards a more equitable world.
And he reminds us that we all have a part to play in dismantling systems of oppression, creating a society where everyone has a chance to thrive, no matter their race or background.
Well said. So as we end this journey through the souls of Black folk, let's leave our listeners with a question to ponder. What contemporary Black authors are you connecting with? Whose voices are you listening to? And whose voices should we all be amplifying? Not just during Black History Month, but all year round.
That's a great question. And remember, we're always adding new deep dives to Witter, so make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more journeys into fascinating books.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, happy reading.